Hello, everybody. This is Beetle Beast, and we're here in Flight Sim 2024 to make another video. Currently have us sitting right above Wichita International Airport, and we're going to do a flight today based off of a comment from my previous set of videos. If you didn't go back and take a peek, my last videos that I posted were navigational kind of instructional aids for the G1000, in which we did GPS navigation and then some ground-based VOR navigation. And the individual asking the question, hey, can you show us how to actually load a flight plan directly into the FMS and the G1000 system? So I realized that, of course, in my last video, I used the departure arrival component inside of Flight Sim 2024. And it worked pretty well, along with using the EFB to actually build out a route. You can then send that directly to your avionics, and it works in every airplane. So you can do that in any airplane that you fly, and the information will show up. But if you want to go a little bit more in detail into an individual avionics system, you will have to learn a little bit more about how to manipulate it in the airplane. And I also don't know if it's going to have the functionality unless you duplicate the effort to put it into the EFB in order to send it to ATC. I don't know if that's going to exist, but from learning how to use the G1000, I think this could be kind of useful for somebody. So it gives me the chance to do some instruction, and it gives you the chance to hopefully learn a little something about how to manipulate the G1000. And I will say, so the G1000 is also a great setup to kind of learn inside of Microsoft Flight Sim, because all of the light airplanes, not all of them, there's like 8 different light airplanes that all have it. The Cessna 172 is what we're going to be flying today. I've flown it kind of extensively with the 208 in the career section, but once again, I never actually load the flight plans in. So this was the first time that I actually gone in to load the flight plans. I would have used the 208 for this tutorial, except it's the only one that has a slightly different look. All the other ones are basically the same. It's in the Cessna 400, pictured there. The SR-22, pictured here. And I'll say for the SR-22, I've got 2 versions of it in my game right now. I've got one from Kenmore, which I think is a port from Flight Sim 2020, and then I've got a one from Working Title. The one from Kenmore has some broken textures. The one from Working Title seems to work fine. So anyway, I've got 2 of them. You might have one. It's also in the Diamond DA40. Then you got the Diamond DA62. Now you can see that one. And the Beach Baron 58, and the Beach Bonanza G36. And then to top it all off, here's the 208. And as you can tell, the 208 has the 3-screen setup. It has a different flight guidance controller. It's just different than all the other ones. All the other ones are pretty darn similar with very slight variations. So anyway, we're going to hop in the Skyhawk. We're going to do a very quick flight out of Wichita. And it's going to be set up as a round robin Wichita to the, we're going to go to Hutchinson via Victor 73, Victor 10 to Wave, and then Victor 532 back to the Wichita VOR, back to the Wichita airport. Going to take off and land on runway 19 left. Like I said, this should be pretty straightforward. But without too much further ado, let's go ahead and click the button, load into the sim. All right, so I've gone in. I took the covers off the outside of the airplane. Now we are sitting inside of the Cessna 172. I will make a couple of comments here just about the setup here that you're looking at. So if you're unfamiliar, this is the Garmin G1000 avionics suite right here. It consists of these 2 screens, and in the middle is an audio controller. The audio control panel, I probably won't talk about too much as we go through. I'm also not going to go into great detail on the modes to control the flight director and the autopilot system, as I've done that in my previous video. And if you guys really are curious about that, feel free to go through it, because I do go through every one of the buttons, how they function, and what they're going to be used for. This is basically going to be for trying to set up the FMS, and then flying it briefly with a couple of different little modifications as we get en route. So without wasting too much more time on that, let's go down here and get this airplane started. All right, so I'm not going to turn on the rest of the avionics real quick, just so you guys can see something that only shows up when the avionics are off. So right now, as I said, there are two screens in the Garmin G1000, and right now, with the avionics turned off, we're in this, I would say, kind of a compressed mode. You get your PFD data. Granted, right now the AHRS is aligning, but you have a PFD here. But to the left of that PFD, you have all of your engine instrument information, which gives you the opportunity to actually even go through and see the engine instrument systems as you would normally on the right-hand MFD. So PFD, primary flight display, MFD, multifunction display. So just wanted to give you that little FYI. This is the only time you'll see it like this, is if you were to lose your secondary MFD screen, then everything kind of fits over here on one. I haven't found a way to actually take it and swap them over so that you could have the MFD over here and the PFD over here. It would only be useful if you were sitting there flying from the right seat. But like I said, I haven't been able to find that. I don't think you can do it. I think it's stuck I think it's stuck with it laid out the way it is. But this is the way it basically works and kind of looks. So let's go ahead and turn on the avionics. Second screen comes on, and once we initialize the second screen here by pressing the enter button or the rightmost soft key, which is right here or right there, your call, boom, your engine information now shows up over here. So the functionality of the knobs are duplicated. Comms, navs, comms, navs. Nav 1 is there to bring it up to nav 2, which is down here. You actually have to left and right click to move your selector down. But those functions are duplicated also. I can change comms from the left side or the right side, and navs from the left side or the right side as well. The same is true for the altitude selector. You can control what's listed here for your altitude from either PFD screen. The actual FMS controller, yeah, so if you wanted to have it on a full screen, I guess you could do it over there. If you bring it up over here, you get this little partial screen. So it might be easier to see it if we were to do it on the right-hand side. I'm going to do it on the left just because that's kind of where I'm sitting, and it's going to make it a little easier for me to input the data instead of having to look over there. But that functionality is essentially the same. The thing that doesn't work is the range mode. You can, scroll up and down on that all you want. And it doesn't do anything when you're on the left-hand screen. It only controls it on the right-hand screen. The only thing that I can think of, and let me try this because I haven't tried this yet. Let's go back. Bring up the map HSI. Right, so I can use the range controller if I bring up a different map on the HSI there, or sorry, just the insert map. If I bring it up on the HSI, it probably works as well, yeah. So if you have the map function laid on the screen, you can use it then. I personally prefer to just have the regular HSI. So that's what we're going to use here instead of having the map up. If I want a map, I've got it over here. And if you wanted an insert so you could have a map over here, that would probably be your best bet. And then you're controlling the left map with this one and the right map zoom level with this. I've been having some problems. Something's been clicking and making it go out of the go outside of the airplane. It's been kind of annoying. So, okay, that's all set up. I think we're pretty well set there. I will say about the controllers here. So you have both outer and inner knobs on multiple controllers here. We will be using the FMS controller here because that's what's going to be used to input data in for a flight plan or to control any of the functionality of the cursors and cursor selections. So we will be using this one right here quite a bit. The altitude one we're going to use a couple times, but not a whole lot. The outer controls thousands of feet, and the inner is going to control hundreds of feet. Here, the outer is going to control your primary numbers here at the front for your tuning, and the inner controls after the decimal point for your radio tuning. The same is true over here on the comm side. It's just identical, just swapped. And also, you're always tuning in the standby. The active is the one that is not highlighted to the inside. So whatever's on the inside is the active. That's nav 1, nav 2, com 1, com 2, standby, standby. And in order to get to the second or the nav 2 or the com 2, you have to use left and right on the mouse at the same time, and that moves your cursor down. It moves your cursor back up. And to swap them, use the swap button. Okay, that should be enough backstory. Like I said, I'm not going through all the buttonology down here, nor up here. We're really going to cover the flight plan and entering a flight plan into the system. So I'm going to lower us just a little bit, and I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. So hopefully we'll be able to see what we're doing, and you can see it on the map from AirNav that I've just posted. So the flight plan that we're going to do is going to be a round robin. If you're not familiar with the terminology, that means we're going to be taking off and landing at the same airport. But I've got a few fixes and some airways that we're going to put in between. So for starters, we click the flight plan button right here. And that brings up this little flight plan page. So things that you can note here: origin, en route, destination. In order to control this cursor that is flashing at us right now, you're going to use the big knob, the outer knob on the FMS. Scrolling with the middle mouse wheel, you can scroll down or up and move that cursor along with it. I will say you are not able to input anything in the lines that have the dashes. Those will be populated once you've input your actual information. All your inputs are going to be done on a line that has a solid line on it. So we are going to take this outer knob, move the cursor down, and once the solid line is highlighted, you want to go towards the inner knob and use your mouse wheel to scroll up one. And that brings you to the waypoint information tab. This page is where you will input waypoints, departure airports, etc., and arrival airports. So that's what we're going to be playing with here. So now that you've got the cursor on this first line, we are going to once again use the inner knob. We're going to scroll up one, and that's going to put a K in the first letter. K is going to be out there for pretty much every airport inside of the U.S. That has runways greater than 5,000 feet in length. If you've got a long runway, you're going to get a K identifier for your airfield. So the K is in there. That's what we're going to use. We're going to move that cursor over now to the right, which puts it into the next space. Like I said, I don't know why that just did that, but it did. Into that next space. And while we're in the next space, we're going to use the inner cursor again to select an I. So we scroll up to I, use the big knob to move the cursor over, scroll up to C, big knob to move the cursor over, scroll up to T. That's going to give us Wichita Airport. There we go. Wichita National, not International Airport apparently. Hit enter. Now we have the opportunity to select the runway. Once again, because it's already highlighted, we're going to use this inner knob. You're going to scroll up, and it's going to bring up your runway selection menu. Scroll down for 19 left. That's going to be where we're closest to. Click enter, and then enter again to accept. Now those dashes that were there previously have gone away, and now the airport shows up, and the runway that we're departing from shows up as well. Perfect. Easy. Now we need to do the en route section. So we're going to once again move the cursor down to the solid line, scroll up to bring up the waypoint page, and from here we're going to put in ICT VOR. So there's the I, scroll over, C, and T. I'm sure you guys are catching on at this point. Nice, easy, and works out pretty well. Click enter again. This is going to give you an option of if there are multiples of this VOR identifier out there, you can find the one that's in North Central USA so that you're actually clicking on the right location. And now we've got ICT VOR shows up. Okay, so the next step, we want to drop in an airway behind the VOR. We're going to use a Victor airway. So Victor 73 is what I would like to select. Because we're already highlighted on the solid line, we're going to click on the menu button. And the first thing that comes up is load airways. There's also a few other things that are here. You've got collapse airways if you've actually expanded to see everything. Delete flight plan shows up, and this allows you, of course, to clear out anything that you put in. If you've already flown to a destination and you want to fly back in the exact same way that you got there, you can do an invert flight plan, which will just swap it from beginning to end, allowing you to essentially save a lot of steps in rebuilding a flight plan. But like I said, the first step that we're going to do here, we're going to load an airway. So we've clicked load airway, click enter, and it's going to automatically populate the entry point, which is the the fix that we had just previously put in. So that's ICT. Now, using the inner knob again, we're going to scroll up one, and that's going to bring up the list of airways that go through ICT, and there are a bunch of them. The one that we want was just up there, Victor 73. So we're going to scroll up Victor 73, click enter, and then that's going to bring us to the exit. This is saying, where are you going to get off the airway? So airways being like a little highway in the sky, it's going to go from one nave to multiple other naves, multiple other fixes and waypoints. We have to select where we're getting off. We're not getting off at Wichita, so we're going to click the button again, once again, inner knob, and you will have a list of all of the different fixes along the airway. Now, the way this is organized is it sets up from where the airway initially begins, which is Tulsa, and it's going to move all the way through until the airway ends, which is at Salina. There will also be one that's going to be grayed out, and that'll be Wichita. That's where we're joining at. You can see it right here. Now, I really wish that this would load in with Wichita at the middle, and then you could scroll up or down to wherever you're going. But I guess this makes it logical for you to be able to work through until you find the fix you actually want. So we're going to go all the way through, and we're going to get off of this one at Hutchinson, VORDME. So we're going to click Hut. And then we're going to scroll down with the big wheel to move the cursor to the load button, and then click enter. Now, that has input the airway along with all of the fixes along the airway until we reach Hutchinson. And you can scroll down here with the large wheel again, and you can see it. So you've got Zymex, Muger, Hustle, and then Hutchinson. Really going to have to find what button is being clicked on here that's turning my stuff off. This is an X56 problem. Because I'm not in VR, I have to use my backup gear. And apparently I still have some hotkey button over here that is not happy with me. So my apologies for that. Okay, moving on. You've reached Hutchinson, and now we're going to have to input another airway. I want to take Victor 10 to the wave intersection. So you're going to do it just like we did the last one. Click menu, load airway, and then we start at Hutchinson, use the little wheel, scroll down, Victor 10, highlighted, enter. Now, where do we want to get off at? We're going to go to the wave intersection. Little wheel, scroll, and then scroll down until you find wave. There it is. Enter. Big wheel to scroll down. Enter again to load it in. And then we can scroll down to see there's wave. After wave, I want to hop one more Victor airway to get us back to Wichita. So we're going to do menu, load airway, from wave. We're going to take the Victor 532, enter, and then we're going to select Wichita. Let's see if we can find it. There it is. Enter, big wheel, enter, and it's now loaded back to Wichita. After that, we need to put in a destination airport. So here we're going to, I scroll down to that solid line underneath, and we're going to make this a KICT again. Wichita, enter. And we'll land on runway 19 left again. Enter, and enter to accept. And with that, you now have a full flight plan. If we wanted to go a little bit further in detail, we could come in here to the procedure page and select an approach. And we'll use the ILS for 19 left. And we could do that right off of the Wichita VOR, which will have a little procedure turn in it. We can load it up. We're not going to put any mins because we don't have to fly anything specific to the bottom, but we'll load it up. And not approved for GPS, it's just for monitoring. That's perfectly fine. And now we have a full flight plan. If we were to come over here and zoom out on our map, this is what we've now built. So first leg to Wichita, up to Hutchinson, over to Wave, back to Wichita, and then fly to Keshi, outbound, procedure turn, back inbound. Pretty straightforward. This is a flight plan, and it looks, works, functions pretty well. So with that, we don't need the flight plan page anymore. Let's go ahead and scroll up an altitude of 4,000 feet, and that's based off of the en route altitude on The legs is actually the highest one that we're going to have on this flight, so we'll just use that as our total and go from there. So if you guys come up with questions, feel free to put them in the comments. In terms of what we're doing now, I think it's about time to go get this airplane in the air. Brakes are off. Because I am not in my my actual sim rig, it's a little bit odd to taxi using the X56 and the twist throttle again. Only because I normally have rudder pedals and I can therefore independent brake. And I only have single brakes here, so you end up with a lot of power in just to make small turns and control the speed. It gets a little bit funky, but like I said, hopefully all of that made some easy sense for you guys and answer some questions. I don't intend on flying this entire route today. We're going to take off. We're going to start on it. We'll fly towards Wichita. We'll join the airway. We'll fly a couple points there. And then I think we'll work our way back so that we can have a little bit of diversion type stuff in it. And we'll work our way back to Wichita a little bit quicker than going all the way out. Because once you go all the way out, there's really not a ton to do other than watch the airplane kind of fly from point to point. It's more than fine to do practice in it. If you guys are trying to get better at navigating and stuff, I think it's an awesome tool to kind of be able to use. But like I said, outside of that, it's not going to be a ton of hard work. It's just going to be flying and following the lines. All right, so we've got pitch up. We got 4,000 feet in there. We're going to be leaving off of runway 19 left, and that should be about it. All right, we'll say the tower just gave us our clearance. Got roll pitch mode right now. We will engage the nav mode once we get in the air. We'll set up ourselves for a little intercept angle to fly over towards the Wichita VOR. And just kind of go from there. This is probably the calmest day ever in Wichita based off of that windsock. And here we go. Let's go ahead. Power's coming in. Airspeed is alive. There's rotation speed. A little bit of back pressure. Plane's climbing. I'll pitch it for their calculated VY. I do think that their calculated VY might be a little bit off that, or the VYs have changed. It used to be 79 knots in the 172 Rs I used to fly, so I'm surprised to see it down there at like 75. But I'm going to get rid of that map. Like I said, I don't particularly enjoy it anyway. I've got a map on the other screen, and I've got navigation sources. I know where I'm going. All right, so let's go ahead. We're going to engage the heading mode. I'm going to spin that heading around to the right. Give us about a 30-degree intercept. Start making that turn. It is amazing to see the visual differences, though, between flying the airplane in VR all the time and then flying it here on the monitor. The game graphically does just look really, really good when you start seeing it on an actual screen again. But gosh, I do love the immersion of VR. And I'm going to go ahead and engage the nav mode. And as you can see, the GPS mode is in the standby while we're still in active for the heading. So the GPS is in the standby. It's going to intercept and fly outbound to the VOR once we intercept the line that was originally in the course. So that little magenta line that you see right there, that's what it's going for, which started, of course, at runway 19, That's what it's going to try to get to. For just about every airplane I've ever flown, whether that be a Skyhawk, or that been an Embraer or a business jet or whatever the heck you're flying, a 30-degree intercept tends to work really well for the vast majority of GPS systems and even ground-based navigation systems. It just typically works. Guarantees you're going to be moving towards the course fast enough that it's going to grab it, and not so much that you've overworked the system and you can't lead the turn, because FMSs, ground-based navigation, and flight directors all are kind of reactionary, and they can be kind of a pain in the butt sometimes. Like right now, it wants me to turn even further to go over there and really grab it. I'm just going to leave it be here at its nice little 30 degree. The course is going to come in, and as it does, that flight director is going to move back to the left. And as it does, we're going to move back to the left with it. There's outs. Slowly lowering the nose, and I'm getting rid of a little bit of that trim as I go. You know, and unfortunate, if you are fortunate enough to have a force feedback stick, you'll be able to feel what the trim's doing. If you do not have a force feedback stick, just kind of lower the nose, let the airplane accelerate, and then I gradually click, a click or so out of trim just to keep it from bouncing all over the place. That just tends to work really well inside of the sim. And then once you kind of get it to the point that you can fly it kind of hands off, you should be pretty well set. Remember, there will be a null zone there inside of your typical stick. Like my X56 has just a little bit of movement, just enough to be able to kind of move it a little left, a little right, and it actually does affect the yoke placement. And I'm sure yours is probably the same. I like it in some sims. It's great for air refueling inside of DCS, because you're literally you can fly with your fingertips. But it will drift on you ever so slightly if you're not paying attention. All right, so with that, we're going to go autopilot on, center up my heading bug, and the airplane at this point is now flying outbound towards the Wichita VOR. It's in GPS mode, altitude and 5,000 feet. We're 5 miles from the VOR right now. And yeah, we're just kind of progressing on our flight plan. Fly to Wichita. Afterwards, it's going to progress down here. Active leg is going to show up as going to Zimix on Victor 73. So we'll get a chance to watch that as it happens. And then somewhere on the way here, past Zimix, we're going to go ahead, actually maybe even before Zimix. What we're going to do is make a change and go to a different waypoint, just to kind of get used to switching things and making adjustments kind of while we're in flight. So while we're here, and since we have a couple miles to go, let's talk a little bit about this engine tuning, because I didn't go through this at all. I've talked about leaning out the airplane before. I know I've done it in a few different videos, especially my cross-country flights. But I will say that the G1000 is actually pretty slick with this. So if we come in here to the engine, you have this exhaust gas temperature, which when I was flying Skyhawks, we only had one temperature probe on the exhaust. So it's actually measuring the temperature of the exhaust from the engine. And something that if you're not used to this, and if this is something that you already know, sorry, I'm just talking, I guess. This is the flight instructor in me. And if it's not something you already know, maybe you're going to learn it. Exhaust gas temperature will increase based on the amount of fuel. So this airplane is fuel injected, like your car. But unlike your car, airplanes don't come with, say, a mass airflow sensor or an air sensor that tells it how much air is coming into the engine, and then it can adjust the amount of fuel that's going into the engine accordingly. Airplanes operate at various altitudes. So you'll be operating at sea level one day, and then you'll be operating at 4,000 feet or 5,000 feet. So we have a manual mixture control right here, which is used to lean the mixture to ensure that the airplane's getting the right amount of fuel for the air density at your specific altitude. An easy way to check that is to look at EGT, exhaust gas temperature. And you can watch at your peak EGT is going to be the time at which the engine is getting the proper amount of fuel to get the hottest exhaust temperatures coming out of the engine. If you have more fuel in there, you're going to cool off that exhaust, and it's going to essentially go out of the exhaust pipe without being burned up. If you get too lean, it's going to cool off again too. So just FYI, your fire becomes less hot. But you want to get it so that you have the highest exhaust gas temperature. Now, that's what I've kind of talked about here before. And as I move the mixture out, let's scroll down ever so slightly so you can see it. As I move the mixture out, you can watch that exhaust gas temperature start to increase. But something cool that's even cooler. So I'm going to go ahead and push that back in. Oh, I didn't even talk about that. The really cheaty way to do this, if you're ever in the airplane or even playing around and you want to do it really quick, watch your RPM. Because as that exhaust gas temperature reaches a peak, that RPM is going to reach a peak too. And if you go too lean, the RPM is going to decrease. If you go too lean, the EGT is going to decrease. They're identical. The same thing is going to happen. So you can essentially watch just RPM or you can watch EGT. It doesn't really matter. But they've brought in an entire area where you can click on for leaning. So what's really cool here about it, and this is, once again, this is just my my nerdism. You have exhaust gas temperatures being measured off of 4 different ports. You also have cylinder head temperature being measured off of 4 different ports. These are all 4 cylinders showing up 1, 2, 3, and 4. 4 being the rearmost cylinder, and in case you didn't know, the Cessna 172 and the vast majority of GA airplanes are air-cooled. They use air and oil circulating through the engine, kind of like a Harley-Davidson, to cool the engine off, which is why you take those little ports off in the front of the airplane, right, when you're about to leave. Those are called cow plugs. They were in the front of the airplane. You didn't see me take them off today because I did it before we started the video, but that's what they're there for. Well, the hottest cylinder, typically speaking, is going to be whichever ones are in the back. So number 4 normally is going to be running hottest. There's baffling inside of the cowling that allows the airflow to be very efficient and move its way around the cooling fins of the cylinders, but that's going to be your temperature. So you can see here where your EGT is. Your cylinder head temperature is going to be actually measured from the block itself. So exhaust temperature, cylinder head temperature, and then we can click through to select different cylinders. So if you see, cylinder 4 is at 1465, cylinder 1's at 1440, 2 is going to be at 1460, it's probably the one back behind cylinder 1, 3 is up in the front, 1435, it's actually the coolest, and 1465 for number 4. And then you can see the cylinder head temperatures, of course, are corresponding. 3 is definitely the coolest. Kind of interesting. So when you start leaning out your airplane, you're trying to avoid what's known as detonation, which is essentially getting the engine to a point that you've got too little fuel, essentially, to try to maintain the ignition. And what you end up with is a pre-ignition that happens inside of the cylinder, essentially causing an uneven distribution of flow across the cylinder head, and you end up with hot spots on the cylinder head top. It's an uncontrolled burn, basically, is the way it works. And if you start getting into that, you do run the risk of melting a piston. You can put a hole right through the center of a piston and destroy an engine. So that's what you're trying to avoid. Once again, it's a video game. Is it going to happen in this airplane? Probably not, although I have had several engine failures inside of 2024 that I never had in 2020. So there is some type of wear and tear on the airplanes. But I would say if you have like the Comanche, I think was the one that was in Flight Sim 2020 that actually had a damage model and a maintenance schedule that you're supposed to be following, that can become important to make sure that you're managing it correctly. So you want to pick whichever is going to be your hottest cylinder, and that's where you're going to be watching for that exhaust gas temperature rise and cylinder head temperature rise. And like I said, we're going to look at that peak EGT, we're going to look at that peak exhaust EGT, and RPM is what I meant to say here. So we're going to go ahead and pull the power back. It appears, yeah, so we're getting a decrease in power already. Looks like 1460 is going to be about my max RPM. We're showing 1485 for the EGT. We keep going, 1490 for the EGT, 2470 for RPM, that's good. So we got a little bit more RPM. We're getting a little bit hotter. 2480. And it's a very slow process. Let's see if we can get 2,500 RPM out of her. Come on. Nope, there's our drop. So I'm going to go just ahead of that drop. And somewhere right around there should be our max power and a safe EGT. And our fuel flow, still 12 per hour, but we have the power all the way in. I'm using full power, so that's not overly crazy. So anyway, hopefully that helps somebody. Pretty neat. I enjoyed it. I like it. I think it's kind of a cool little setup. Okay, so with that said, we are now on our way to Hessel. Let's go ahead and use the cursor, which is also, by the way, left and right click and then a drag. Let's go direct to wave this time. So if you were to click on the direct to button right here, it's not going to send you to wave. It's going to send you to where you're going right now, and that's not what you want. You also can't use this to scroll down to the next fix. I wish you could. It just doesn't work. You can use it to put in your own waypoints that you wanted to, but that's not what we're here to do either. So we're going to close that out, clear it. And what I'm going to show you how to do is go to flight plan, and you want to highlight the fix that you want to be going to. So that's going to be wave. And then I click direct to, and it allows you to do it. So at that point, wave is there. Use the big knob to scroll down to activate, enter. And now we've got a turn going back to the wave intersection. Pretty slick, pretty easy. Definitely shaved some time off from going all the way out here to Hutchinson and then working our way back. But that's basically how that works. I don't think there's any major things about that should be confusing, but we're going to do it again just for good measure. So once again, let's go ahead and click on the flight plan button, and let's go all the way back to the Wichita VOR, which is where we left from earlier. And I didn't even mention that. I probably should have. So if you have the plane, let's see here. Come on. If you've slewed it over so that you can see something, such as the Wichita VOR there, in order to get yourself back and centered on the airplane, just left and right click at the same time, just like you're going to center up the heading bug, and that reselects you back to being on the plane. Just as an FYI, in case you guys find yourselves lost. Okay, so we're going to go ahead, and I'm going to select down to Wichita VOR, which is under here for the ILS 19. Click direct to. Let's go to Wichita, activate it. And now we're in the right turn. Going back to Wichita, we've just cut that entire wave leg off, and we're going to our next fix. Pretty straightforward, pretty easy. But if you're doing something in career mode and you weren't sure how to select that direct to because it's not giving you the point you want, that's how you interact with it. Go to the flight plan page first, highlight where you actually want to go to as your direct to, and then click the button and it'll go there. Also, if you have any of those fixes that we had previously, they're still in here. So Birdo, Jubvo, Wave. If you wanted to, you could still go all the way back here. And if we clicked HUT, it would turn around right now and go right back to HUT. So you still have the ability to go to any of the fixes that you've previously navigated to and that you had planned to go to in the first place. Let's go back towards Wichita, which is where we're headed right now. There's not a whole lot more to talk about. I think I've kind of covered everything important about how to enter the flight plan, kind of how to make some changes and do some direct twos to go to different locations. So if you want to turn off the video at this point, feel free. I'm going to go ahead and land, though. So I'm going to go ahead and time accelerate us back towards Wichita. In fact, actually, you know what? We're not going to do that yet. Let's do one more thing. I would love to bring up, so there are these LIDO charts that are inside of here. I didn't know about these in the EFB until, gosh, it's been about 2 weeks. Let's bring up the EFB so we can see it. And bring up, no, there's no clip charts. How is that for broken? Let's see here. Oh, you know what? Okay, I think I know why. Let's go in here and let's add Wichita, Wichita. And now let's go in here. Okay, good. There's our charts. You've got to have information as to where you're at or where you're going. Perfect. Let's bring up the clip chart for the approaches for 19 left. And here's the ILS Loc 19 left. That's what we're going to shoot today. And let's zoom in so we can actually read it a little bit. So these are Lido charts, which I think is Lufthansa. Is the creator of the charts. The only thing that you'll notice here that doesn't work great for light airplanes is that they're Cat C and D minimums, which are for bigger transport category aircraft, as in you will be shooting the approach down to it's essentially a higher speed. That's really all it comes down to. That's all they put in here, though, so you won't be able to get Cat A and Cat B mins. Luckily, Cat A and B mins are more, they're typically speaking more not restrictive. They're easier to comply with than the Cat C or Cat D mins, just because Cat C or Cat D are for faster moving aircraft, so you've got to have that in there for the safety margin. If you're looking at an ILS approach, though, they are almost always, and I say almost, 200-foot ILSs, and you typically need 1,800 RVR if you have a flight director, or it's a half-mile visibility otherwise. So that's what we're going to do today, and we'll shoot it kind of like a real approach, but let's just take a peek at it real quick. Right now, we show up kind of on the edge of the approach plate here as we're working our way towards the Wichita VOR, currently 5 miles away from it. We're going to hit the Wichita VOR. We're going to fly inbound on the 084 radial. It's a 10-mile leg, and we will be at 3,600 feet, no lower than that. We're going to come over the fix Keshi, which is also listed as another IAF, and from Keshi, we're going to fly a 016-degree radial outbound at or above 3,200 feet, fly up, do a procedure turn, 061 outbound, to intercept the 196 radial for the ILS. This will be for the localizer coming back in. We're going to cross Keshi again at 3,000 feet. And then if we come down here to the profile view, Keshi at 3,000, down to 1,520 is going to be our decision altitude for the ILS. If we have to go missed, it's going to be let's see here, direct IC climb to 3,000. I have to imagine that's what they're going to tell me to do. This is a different format that I'm normally used to looking at, so I just want to check to make sure I'm not missing something there. Yeah, it makes sense. So Pishi is IC. So we're going to go to Pishi and hold, and we can check that to make sure that all of those fixes show up. So there's Keshi. There's your procedure turn. This is a computer navigation fix, CFBSQ. Just happens to be out there. It's an intermediate fix. And then you've got the Keshi final approach fix that you're going to cross to the runway. And then if you have to go afterwards, here's the missed approach to Pishi, missed approach holding pattern, hold at Pishi. It even shows you what your hold's going to be. 016 is your inbound. So we would come out here, drop that entry, fly back over the nav aid, and then make right-hand turns. Easy. Let's do it. I don't think I have anything else. So we know that it's all in the box. We are essentially ready to do the approach. Now, flight plan's going to get lowered a little bit. That down. And that should work. I'll bring up the tab again so we can see us on the chart. And let's go ahead and fly this approach. So as we said, the next altitude is going to be 3,600 feet. I'm going to go ahead and lower that in. Once we cross Wichita, we can start our descent down to 3,600. All right, 4 seconds. It's coming up quick. All right, so 3,600 feet for this leg on the 084 radial off of the Wichita VOR. I'm going to go ahead to, let's do a flight level change. And we'll just go ahead and pull the power out a little bit. And we're going to let this fly to Keshi. I might time accelerate it here just a notch or two. We'll see. Just so we can cover the ground a little bit more. All right, so now we're hanging out. We've got out captured. I'm going to go ahead and set 3,200 feet now for the next leg on the outbound. We've already flown over where the obstacles would have been. They're just to the north of us right now. I wonder if we can see those towers. I don't see them out there. Oh, no, there they are. Set of towers. We'll have to make sure we turn down the time acceleration as we approach the fix, because if we don't, it will be difficult to make the turn. Bring that up here a little bit. There's the marker beacon. I'm going to go ahead and slow it back down to normal time. Just inside of a mile from Keshi. We'll have a left turn. Outbound 016 degrees will be our course. And there's our turn. All right. And with that, we'll be flying outbound. It's kind of funky how it allowed us to go so far through that course. It did not have that as a, it's not listed as being an overfly, so there's not a great reason for us to fly quite that far and then have to come back through to re-intercept the 016. But that is kind of what it is. Get our mixture back in. All right, we'll go with a little time acceleration here. Actually, you know what? Because we're going to have to do the descent, I won't do the time acceleration because the airplanes do act a little bit funky in the descent if you don't. If you have the speed kind of set up, the airplane seems to have a real hard time attempting to actually level off. So there's outs. All right. So we'll need 3,200 feet for the procedure turn, 3,000 feet on the inbound leg, and we're going to hold that 3,000 feet until we get back to Keshi. And then we're going down to 1,520, as we've already talked about, as the minutes for the approach. Now, we could let this thing do it all by itself, and it will very happily. I think I'm going to go ahead and take over, though. Let's put it into the heading mode. We'll make the right-hand turn, go 061 outbound. And then it's going to be a left-hand turn to come back in on about a 241 course on the way back. All right. Give ourselves a few seconds on the course. And let's go ahead and turn ourselves back around. I've probably angered the FMS, and that's why it's looking kind of funky here. Let's see if I can do procedure, vector to final. Let's try that. Yep, that'll work. That'll work perfect. Let's keep that course coming. We're going to go a little bit through the localizer there. At least I'm assuming that we're going to. Yeah, really? That wasn't that bad. Kind of assumed that it would have gone through. All right, I'm going to go ahead and hand fly this, and let's Let's get the autopilot off, huh? Let's really scare everybody. Okay, so here we are. We're going to be flying inbound. I'm going to go ahead and adjust that course right to about there. So I love to use the heading bug to keep me centered. I know that we've talked about that before in the game. But I prefer to use the heading bug as my guide during ILS approaches. And the reason for that is that you can really kind of gauge just how much correction you're putting in. When I first started flying instruments, I was in it was a classic 172, and we had dual OBSs, and I can remember how difficult it was to fly in ILS. Heck, I can remember when I went off to the airlines and the other instructors who I was working with at the time, we all commented about it. Flying an approach was an incredibly, it wasn't a hard process, but it takes a lot of concentration, especially early on. Using an airplane like this where you have a glass cockpit is significantly easier. There's just more information at your disposal. One of the easiest pieces of information that you'll have with you. Give me 1 second here while I arm the approach mode. Approach is active, locus captured, and the glide slope is sitting on standby. One of the coolest things is the drift indicator. So that little, and I have to switch hands and fly with the other one, this little magenta diamond that's kind of hidden behind the 202, and it's right there on the course. That's the actual vector of the aircraft. That's your aircraft's, I don't say your trend vector, but that's where you're going. Which is pretty slick to have. Essentially, if you can put that on top of the course that you're trying to fly, it's going to take you right to where you need to be. I mean, and that's just something that didn't exist back in the day. We were always kind of guessing at it a little bit and playing. But something that an old flight instructor of mine had told me years ago, if you have a heading bug up, try to keep your course corrections within the confines of that heading bug widthwise. So the edges of the bug, the little edges of the blue and the blue, you really don't want to be getting outside of that for the sake of trying to do a course correction, because you'll end up just chasing that localizer all over the place. And once again, the closer you get to the localizer needle, the more sensitive it is. And of course, you saw that if you watched my previous video with the ground-based navigation and the RNAV navigation, the GPS navigation, but used for the ILS approach that we did at the end of it. I did that kind of backwards when I did those videos, and that was because that was some poor planning on my part. My apologies. Glide slope is alive. We've got 1 dot. Love looking at this like this, though. It feels like I'm flying with the foggles on again. Foggles are used to cloud your outside vision so you could see only the instruments when doing instrument training. Not a lot of fun when you were doing it, but it was great for getting yourself ready. You always got just a little corner, that little sliver of ground that you could see if you weren't actually in the clouds. All right, I'm going to go ahead and put my next notch of flaps in. And I'm going to fly this approach with just the 20 degrees of flaps. And that should be more than enough to take us down to the runway. Keep trying to pay attention. 3,000 is my missed altitude. Just wanted to check that again. And if you notice any shakiness there, I'm literally swapping which hand I'm flying with so I can control the mouse with my other hand. So that's why it was kind of bouncing around a little bit more than I kind of wanted it to. All right, I'm going to say that my heading bug might be just a little off. I'm going to move it just a little bit left. Somewhere right about there. All right, so we're going down to 1520. We're a little over 1,000 feet above the minimums right now. And something that I've mentioned before with the Skyhawk, they're incredibly stable if you're flying the airplane. Well, they're not incredibly stable no matter what. But if you're flying instruments in a very light airplane, a little bit fast, I would normally fly an approach visually at about 65 knots. If I'm flying in the clouds in a Skyhawk, a little bit of extra speed, just a little bit, is kind of helpful for keeping everything I want to say smooth. If you start getting at 65 knots in the real airplanes, they kind of blow around a lot. And so that little bit of extra, that extra 10 knots of speed, as long as you can bleed it off before landing, is perfectly good in terms of making the airplane just a little bit more stable on the approach. And you kind of get to that point where you've been flying larger airplanes, especially if you have, for a period of time, where flying instruments in a Skyhawk starts going, I don't know. It just doesn't have the stability that you get in a large transport aircraft. And then you start saying to yourself, I don't think this thing's really designed to fly in the clouds and shoot approaches down to 200 feet. But we're going to demo 200 feet today. And with the flight director, it's probably a little bit more chill. So, all right, we're coming with 500 feet to those minimums. That's above the ground. 300 feet to the minimums. Yeah, 200 feet to minimums. And I will say, one of the things that they really need to make an update in the career mode is the ability to divert to an alternate airport if you can't land. They've kind of made this assumption that you will always be able to land, and that just isn't true. It's definitely not true in real life. You never want to force a bad decision. 100 feet to the minimums. Just saw some guys who had to go around last week. We came very close to having to go around last week. And here we go. Here's our mins, our DA showing up. Should be 200 feet above the dirt. There's the ground. We'll continue inbound. Start slowing her back just a little bit. But yeah, if you depart in the career mode towards an airport, the assumption is even if it's low IFR, you're going to be able to land. And not every airport that you depart towards is going to have an ILS approach that's going to get you down to 200 feet. They may not even have an RNAV approach to get you down low. And then you're stuck, unable to fly to the airport and land. And yeah, that's something that I think really would benefit inside of Flight Sim 2024 if they can update that to include airports that that you're not able to land at, so that you can actually continue on and continue your mission after landing somewhere else. Take on a little bit more gas and then fly on. But they haven't done that yet. I imagine it may come as an update, maybe, but we'll see. You know, it's just, it wouldn't take a whole lot of coding, I don't think, to make that change. But I do think, we're not going that way, turn that off. I do think it would really kind of enhance the career mode a bit more. So anyway, hopefully you guys liked that video. Hopefully it answered the question about how to load into the flight plan. Hopefully you got to see an approach again and kind of how to shoot one. And if you've got questions, put them in the comments. Obviously, from what you just saw, I do read through those comments. And every time I read through them, it typically gives me a little bit of help to figure out what it is that I should do next. As, like I said, I really do enjoy sharing some aviation knowledge and a little bit of aviation love with everybody. And this has been a cool little thing that I really just enjoy doing. So thanks you so much for watching. Happy simming, guys. And shoot me a comment if you guys have another suggestion for a different video. Take care.